All right, welcome back, everyone. So I thought we could just jump in with a little bit of Q&A, and then we'll do a little bit of small group work on language of invitation. So if you'd like to unmute yourself or you just want to use the chat box, do we have any questions about language of invitation?
Oh, no.
And if we could mute ourselves if we're not talking, that might cut down on the background noise.
Okay, we have a question. All three of us that were in our group were wondering about the like a prescriptive invitation. In some of the languages that was in there said, notice what you're noticing should not be said. And then we were looking at some stuff and it said, notice what you're noticing. So can you explain that?
So where were you seeing those?
In the notes on prescriptive invitations versus descriptive.
Mm.
And there was a little area that said, gave some examples not to say, and that was in there.
Yeah. So notice what you're noticing is kind of like a meta thing where you're thinking about what you're doing as opposed to just actually noticing. Now we're noticing what we're noticing. This kind of creates an internal feedback loop for people where they're not just noticing anymore. They're trying to notice what they're noticing, which really overcomplicates their process. It's really less of a note about prescription and more a note about simplicity, where notice what you're noticing kind of drives people into this loop of like, okay, I'm noticing the color of these leaves. And now I'm noticing that I'm noticing the color of these leaves. And now I'm noticing that I'm noticing that I'm noticing the colors of these leaves. And then it kind of drives people like into this insane place, you know? Now, this is another great example of like, will it destroy the experience to tell people notice what you're noticing? No, probably not. It just overcomplicates the invitation. Does that make sense?
I'm thinking, do we use it or not? Is it best not to use it then?
My recommendation is not to use it. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to say something at the end, you could just say simply notice.
Okay.
But
Thanks.
that's also probably superfluous that, you know, the entire invitation is kind of built around sensory noticing. So if you say, you know, wander out and notice the smells of the flowers, just notice. It's like, well, that's redundant, right? Like we've already kind of said, like, here's the invitation, which is all about noticing. It's all about paying attention. And now we're just kind of reinforcing that again. Yeah. I think there's kind of like a Zen quality of writing these invitations where if you can say it with fewer words than you have already written out, it simplifies things. It's really about getting to the essence of what you're trying to invite people to do, right? Yeah. Okay, Pat, not so much a question, but there's clearly a balance about how much language to use in the description. Are there any suggestions? Pat, can you unpack this one for me a little bit?
Yeah, so in our group, I just asked if anybody had been with you on your walk on Sunday. And one of the other participants was, and I had noticed then in your description of in the words that you were using in terms of the invitation, you were, I think what I would describe as more open-ended and fewer words, which for me was really helpful in terms of kind of letting me kind of find where I might go or how I might handle that invitation. But I was curious, are there any particular invitations where more is better?
Well, if you're asking me personally, I'd say no. I think leaner is always better. It just simplifies the whole thing for people. Maybe the one place where I think adding more can be helpful is this technique around providing some examples. So let's take an example from my last walk. There was what we did. Hold on, I have to remind myself. I always keep some notes on these walks, so I should be able to find this. Okay, yeah, so treasure receiving, the invitation is essentially, take 15 minutes to wander and receive some treasures from the land. Don't go looking for treasure, just allow whatever your body stumbles upon and whatever draws your attention, and trust that these are treasures. These treasures might be tangible or intangible. Simply receive what is offered, gather them, and bring them back to this circle. Even empty-handedness may be a treasure. So I could trim this down to just say, okay, this is called treasure receiving. Take 15 minutes to wander and receive some treasures from the land. That could be the whole invitation. But then providing a few more of these kind of scaffolding pieces kind of brings people's awareness or perspective to the possibilities within this invitation. So we can kind of dissect this a little bit. The first thing after the initial invitation was this comment about don't go looking for the treasures. Just allow whatever you stumble upon or whatever draws your attention and trust that those are the treasures. So now I've created some kind of like a framework where it kind of unpacks that idea that we're not treasure hunting, we're treasure receiving. Okay, now this next bit, these treasures may be tangible or intangible. Now this opens up people's possibilities to, so now as I'm a participant and I'm wandering out, I'm not just kind of looking in the external world and saying, oh, I need to find something physical to bring back to the circle. Now I've given people permission to bring back something that is intangible. Maybe it's a memory or a song or a sound or anything, right? And then this third part about even empty-handedness may be a treasure. We talked about that a little bit last week, that essentially that creates like a failure-proof measure within this invitation, that if at the end of 15 minutes your hands are empty, well, now your empty-handedness has become your treasure. So each of these pieces kind of has its own logic to it, that all of them together create this invitation in such a way that it becomes very open, it becomes about non-striving, and it has this quality of failure-proof, that you can't really fail at this. And over time, you'll come to kind of play with elements like this as you craft your invitations, that it can elevate the sense of possibility and safety within the experience for the participants. Now, I think there was also, right, we did traces. So for those of you that weren't there, this invitation sounds something like, for the next 15 minutes, find a place to sit or maybe wander to a few spots and leave small traces upon the land around you. This can be done in 10,000 ways. Consider that in every interaction, we imprint our presence upon the world, whether it's with a footprint, an offering of breath, a sound, moving or arranging stones or leaves or anything at all. After a while, stop, close your eyes, place your hands upon your heart, and perhaps notice what traces the land is leaving upon you as well. So in this example, providing kind of context for what do I mean by traces. So again, I could just say the first sentence, just 15 minutes, wander, and leave traces upon the land around you. And then building upon that, scaffolding it, saying, you know, there's so many ways that we leave traces upon the land. Here are a few examples, right? The breath, the footprint, the sound, the arranging of different beings. So this kind of opens up a sense of possibility for people, in part so that they feel that there's really no need to try. If the way you receive this invitation is that leaving footprints are the traces that you're leaving, then really all you have to do is kind of mindfully wander, and you're doing the invitation. But it also opens up the sense of possibility for maybe you want to take this time to kind of arrange beings. Maybe you want to use this time to actually change the environment in some way. And so it opens up kind of a wider sense of possibility. I think we talked about this also in relation to this invitation about greeting trees. I use this invitation a lot. I'll say, you know, let's wander out and greet the trees with our bodies. There may be 10,000 ways to do this. This might look like a hug, or a high five, or holding hands, or a bow, or maybe just the gift of our attention. And so giving people a set of possibilities, in this example, I'm actually kind of really consciously working with a range of edginess. That within this example, at least for me and my experience, I think that hugging trees and bowing to trees are at the top of the edginess scale, that the average person will find that to be edgy. And then at the bottom is just offering the gift of our attention. And then you have some in the middle. It's like holding hands with a tree or a high five. This is a little playful, and it's kind of in this mid-range of edginess. So I workshopped that invitation in 100 ways. It started with actually just me being curious about if I could get away with doing a tree hugging invitation. Like, all right, for this invitation, we're going to hug some trees. And a lot of people found that that was ridiculously edgy. Personally, I like bowing to trees, but a lot of the feedback from people around workshopping that was that this is also very edgy. I don't feel comfortable bowing to anything. And so then it softens into this realm of possibilities that it's like, okay, we are greeting trees. Here's a range of ways you could greet a tree with your body. And then at the end of offering these, you know, this set of examples, you can say, and I'm going to trust that you will find a way to greet these trees that feels right for you. So then you've given people a scale of edginess options, and then you've empowered them to not choose from only those options, but to also give them permission to find a way that feels good for them. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of tactical reasons, technical reasons why you might add description. Drawing from these examples, working with a range of edges, creating fail-safe measures, opening people up to a sense of possibility that they might not have otherwise thought of. I feel like there were more, but now I'm forgetting. Does that answer your question? Okay, great. Elizabeth.
I would also imagine, like, one, I think there's a lot that we don't know because we're not like immersed in this practice yet. Sorry. I bet there's a lot that we don't know because we're not yet like totally doing this day to day. And I'm guessing a lot we'll learn, but also I would imagine that your audience might play a role in terms of like how edgy they might feel. And so you can tailor your invitation to your audience a bit. Like, for example, if I'm doing a walk with fellow forest therapy guides, I could probably do a tree hugging tree hugging invitation and get away with it versus people who've never forest bathed before, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Right. And the reality is that most of the time when you're guiding, you don't know anything about your audience.
Right.
The only exception to that is if you kind of create a program where you say, we'll talk about this more in the last module on business, but some folks like to do it this way, where instead of selling individual walks, they try to recruit a group of people and they sell them a package. Let's say it's 7 walks in 7 weeks. And the pitch is kind of like, I'm going to teach you how to self-facilitate a forest bathing practice. So you're going to pay me for all 7 walks right up front. And you don't have to come to all 7. You can come to as many as you want, but you pay me for all 7 as a package. It's not priced like a la carte. And so halfway through that 7 walk series, you might start doing things like, we're going to do a tree hugging invitation, because you know these people and you know where their edges are at. But if you're just receiving people from the public, you have no idea, right? Generally, I kind of just have like one sensitive group thing where I'm more aware of people's edges, which are people who are survivors of some kind of trauma. I do a fair amount of work with a group of people that suffer from dysautoimmunia issues, like autoimmune system disorders. And that's a group with a higher level of sensitivity than my average group. So that's kind of the exception to the rule. Generally speaking, I don't know where this group is in terms of edges, and the group is not going to be consistent. One person could have, basically almost everything is going to feel edgy. So you can't really anticipate what's going to be edgy and what's not. And that just highlights the importance of explaining that everything is an invitation. For those of you that weren't on my walk this weekend, because you've all been on a few walks now, I kind of shortened my introduction a little bit. But I did not leave out the part about explaining that everything is an invitation, because it really is the most important part of the introduction, because this is what gives you the ability to offer invitations that are edgy, because people can just do something else. Because there's no way you're going to be offering invitations that don't have the potential to be edgy. It's just a part of work. And Elizabeth, we will definitely talk more about approaches to traumatized populations, but I want to try to get to language of invitation stuff on this call, so we'll save that one. All right, any other burning questions before we jump into stuff? Oh, Jane, what you got? Jane, you're muted. Can't hear you.
One of the, when you brought up again this recently about when you put your hands over your heart, and could you talk a little bit more about that? I mean, I think whether that's edgy or not, I'm not sure to some people, but how you bring that in to an invitation.
I mean, you can just say it. What do you mean bring it in? It can just be a part of the invitation.
A part of it that after they've done X, then put your hands on your heart and see how you've I'm sorry, was it with the traces that you did that?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I'll do this as I'll kind of build this into a sit spot where I'll say, go find a place to sit. And once you find that place, begin by just closing your eyes and really coming into the body, just noticing the sensation of sitting, noticing the breath, and noticing your heart. And just spend a few minutes in that place. And when you feel ready, then open your eyes and just notice what's around you. And we'll do this for about 15 minutes. So in that example, it's used to kind of ground people into place because they've been wandering. And like usually when people are wandering and trying to find a sit spot, there's a little bit of thinking process happening, you know, like, oh, is that a good spot? Oh, maybe there would be better. Oh, that place has a bench. That looks nice. Okay, I'll choose that. So it kind of creates this way for people to come to their sit spot and then come back down to zero and then engage the process. Now, other times you can put it on the end of things where you have people kind of do something, and then there's kind of this coming back to emptiness, coming back to the heart sense, and then coming back in. So it can just create this kind of punctuation within the experience. But the heart sense we're going to cover for an entire unit. So we'll definitely get more deep into that.
Ben, it's
Gretchen.
Kathleen. Can you
Oh.
hear me okay?
Yeah, all right. Kathleen, then we'll do Gretchen.
Okay, sorry. I'm only on audio today. Just when it kind of ties to Elizabeth's question of participants at different levels of understanding or involvement in prior course therapy walks. So when or if participants ask for clarifying questions, like how much more do you elaborate? I feel like in society in general, I'm making a stereotypical statement here, but people like yearn for like, I need A through Z. Tell me exactly what to do, when to do it, and how long to do it. And I'm hearing loud and clear that these invitations are really less is more in what we are inviting them to do. So do you get lots of clarifying questions from participants? And if so, any recommendations on how to handle those so they can just experience it in the best way possible?
Yeah, I mean, basically, whenever you get asked a question, you can just say, whatever feels good to you. Or you can say, there's no right or wrong way to do it. So it just kind of throws it back at them and says like, I don't know, you will find a way, you'll figure it out. And then there's also kind of the play dumb technique, which is like, I don't know. This one I employ a lot when people try to get me to engage cognitively or factually with them. People will say, you know, oh, what species or what's the name of this tree? And I'll say, well, you know, I call it Bob, but if you ask, it might give you a different name. And then people realize that I'm being very silly. And, you know, they understand that they're not going to get me to engage in that type of a conversation. But you can also just say, I have no idea. Even when you do, even when you know, you just basically pretend like you know nothing. And it kind of creates a dynamic where people realize that they're not going to get anything out of you and they just stop trying.
Thank you.
Gretchen.
Hi, I have a question about where invitations that are sort of imaginal veer into thinking. And the question kind of comes from some of the invitations in Amos's book. And I'm wondering if it's because I recognize that the purpose of the book is that people could pick it up and kind of take themselves out. And so I understand it's kind of a slightly different context, but one, I think I've seen some invitations in there that are a bit maybe prescriptive. But one example that I'm thinking of that I really quite like, but I just kind of curious your thoughts. There's an invitation where you're kind of going out and imagining rooms in a house and kind of imagining some of the things in there. But then there's some parts about like, what would you name this room? And like you might point out. So I'm just wondering whether this is a matter of context, a matter of personal guide style, or whether like what you might say about that line.
Gosh, it's like a weird question for me because, you know, Amos wrote his book a long time ago and we've been evolving this curriculum for a long time. And like, okay, different trainers have some different ideas about this particular thing. This question of the imagination. For me, the imagination really takes me into my head. Therefore, I don't really like to invite people to imagine things because I find it brings on like a cognitive process. I'm really interested in getting people into a deep sense of embodiment and then from there, it's like the forest is the therapist, you know, anything can happen. That being said, I don't think this is like off the table. It's not bad. In that way, I guess it is a stylistic choice. It's like, yeah, if that's kind of what you're called to do, and the sensitivity required to do this is really kind of finding that balance or that line where it's like, okay, how far can I go into this before I'm basically just getting people to do like an imaginal meditation? Because if you get people to a place where their senses are not operating anymore, it's all happening in here, then it's really not an invitation that fits within the scope of practice. You know, it's not sensory, it's not really forest therapy. But this thing with the, I think he calls it like the green mansion,
Yeah.
right? It's like, okay, you know, if we're using our senses to kind of like sense what this room is, then that can work. That can be fine.
Right. Okay, that's really helpful. And it is the sensory prompts are embedded in there too.
Right, right.
Which, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm reading this book, The Call of the Wild, and in The Call of the Wild, the author talks about these 5 ways of processing. There's thought, images, movement, emotion, and sensation. And so within forest therapy, I think sensation is at the top, or you know, it's the entry point to everything else. And part of the logic of sensation being the entry point is because human beings today, we don't process through that sensory channel. We almost exclusively process through the thinking channel. But through the sensing channel, other things start coming up. The images, which is where, you know, the word imagination comes from, the images arise, the emotions arise, and the movement arises. So working within those 4 channels, I think all of those are fine, as long as we're not kind of getting stuck in this place with images where we're coercing people into experiencing a certain image, or we're getting people so deep into that imaginal process or that imaginal channel that it cuts off the sensory, emotional, and movement channels. Great question. Thank you. All right, last call. All right, let's talk about some invitations. So I like to start this with a quote from Picasso, who said, "Learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist." I think this is very true for language of invitation. In this training, you're going to get a lot more feedback on your language of invitation than you are about anything else. And unless you're being really prescriptive, you know, unless your invitation is like, wander out and feel gratitude for being alive. If it's not at this level of prescription, we might give you some very granular feedback about this, because we really want you to understand the rules of this process. But ultimately, you're not going to follow the rules. You're going to learn how to break them like an artist. So I always say, keep that in mind. You know, this isn't about doing it just right. It's about really understanding the framework and then making informed artistic decisions about how you want to use this. So just a super duper quick recap about SOSI, S-O-S-I. Invitations should be simple. They're not hard. Should be fairly relaxing, not a lot of efforting. This follows a range of description. Simplicity exists in a relative scale. Not every invitation has to be 1 sentence. Sometimes people confuse simplicity with the invitation should be as few words as possible, right? Simplicity doesn't mean the invitation is only 1 sentence. Simplicity just means that it's easy and relaxing and not a lot of efforting. So open, perhaps the most important, just means that we're not prescribing how people should think or feel or perceive reality. We're not leading people towards outcomes. We're not leading people towards emotional, cognitive, spiritual, social outcomes. One of my students once reflected that invitations are, what did he say? It's about the process, not the product, right? We're not trying to get people to the product. We're trying to create a process for people. And we're really not concerned with the product because that's where the forest is doing the therapy. Third is that they are sensory, of course, like we talked about just now, this is an embodiment practice, and all the cognitive and emotional experiences flow out of that embodied relationship between the participant and the more than human world. And they are infinite. There's no way to finish the invitation. There's no way to achieve completion. In theory, an invitation should be something that you could do for hours and hours and hours, but we don't do an invitation for hours and hours because we usually tell people, you know, we're going to do this for 15 minutes. But the point of infinity is that they shouldn't be able to achieve it in 5 minutes and then come back to you and say, I'm done. I achieved it. I did it. Well, then maybe the invitation was not infinite. So when creating invitations in partnership with the more than human world, this is about finding sensory pathways to connect people and the beings of the more than human world. So let's just brainstorm, all of us together right now. What are some different ways that your body can interact with trees? Either unmute yourself or just pop it in the chat. Touching.
Touching.
Okay. So let's just pause there for a second. Can we break touching down even further? What do we mean? How many different ways of touching can we name? Okay, touching with fingertips, right? Okay, what else? Sit and lean against the tree. Yeah, so touching by leaning. Oh, cheek to cheek. Yep, okay. Brushing softly. Yes.
Kissing the tree.
Kissing the tree. Yep. Hugging, embracing. Okay. Might consider climbing the tree, swinging on the branches. Oh, yeah. Okay. Taking your shoes off and laying on your back and putting the soles of your feet on the tree. Okay. What else? Maybe dancing with the tree.
Head to head, put your head on the tree.
Head to head. Yep.
You can
Okay,
tickle a
good.
tree.
Tickle a tree. Let the tree tickle you. Yeah, great. All right. Beyond touching, what else we got? Sight. Okay, so again, sight. Can we break this down a little bit further? How many different ways can we see the tree?
You can lay down and look up at the tree and the leaves.
Yep, gazing upward through the canopy. It's very nice. What else? Looking between the branches. Oh. Noticing from very close and far away. Yes. Gazing at different angles, right?
Maybe
Seeing
noticing
color.
Oh, I was just gonna say maybe noticing the sunlight through the trees with your eyes open and then also with your eyes closed, how you can see a different shade of it through your eyelids.
Love it. Yes. Color, texture, height, leaf shape. Yes. Lines, patterns in the bark. Right. So just coming into this kind of granular level, the patterns, the leaves. Sometimes I do an invitation on the full moon where I'll have people, I call it like moon framing. So it's like finding the way that the branches, this works really well in the winter, can like frame the moon. So I guess this is really a looking through the trees invitation. But yeah, this is what I'm talking about. Inspecting the roots where the tree meets the earth. Yes. See how all the leaves are unique. Ah, interesting. Sun shadows to the branches on the forest floor. What other beings are on the tree? Right. Okay. So just with sight and touch, we've already come up with like 30 invitations here. This is amazing. What else we got?
Taste.
Taste. This one's edgy.
Licking
Yeah. Yeah, licking the tree. I mean, if there's so sometimes you're working in like a really specific way where if there's like pine sap, for example, like this has a very evocative taste and smell to it. And so you remember I talked a little bit about scope last week, where it's like, okay, is the invitation about all the trees? Is it about all the pine trees, or is it about this one pine tree? So sometimes you find like a class of beings, like all the trees, or one species, or one particular tree of that species, and it has something very specific to offer, right? Maybe it's fruiting or flowering. Maybe it has kind of, it's been like wounded and there's a lot of sap coming out of it. Okay, now that I can work in partnership with. How do I get people to connect to that? So yeah, oftentimes if I'm working with taste, it's in a very specific way. It's not just like run around and taste everything. Right? Not only is that a little bit dangerous, but also it's just really edgy for people. I doubt that people would really, unless it's a group of forest therapy guides, in which case 50% of them would do it. Otherwise, maybe not. But yeah, if there's something that you know kind of really has this taste experience, then you can go into that. And sometimes leaves, particular leaves have that. There are some species of tree where it's like, yeah, we can kind of munch on this. And sometimes to do that kind of thing, you might create what I like to consider like a mini invitation, where this invitation is only going to last like 3 to 5 minutes. But usually it involves like ethical harvesting, giving people, what has been harvested. And then it's like, yeah, go find a place to sit and start by just feeling what I've given you, and then smell it, and then taste it. And then we'll come back. But I know exactly what they're putting in their mouth. And I know exactly that because I harvested it, that it's clean. It's not like just run around and go taste things, right? All right. We're doing awesome at this. Trees, we got 30. Let's talk about a different one. What about water? So let's say you have like a creek or a river, or maybe it's a lake. What can we do? Like, how can our bodies interact with this being? You might consider some of the ways we can interact with this being does not require us to touch the water, and other ways do. Touching or skipping rocks. So again, what do we mean by touching? What does that mean? What does that look like? One of the invitations that I really like doing with water, this only really works if it's either a calm surface or like a very light flow. Have y'all ever seen those water striders? They're little insects that can stand on top of the water. And next time you see them, notice if you see this, they make these 4 little shadows, these little circular shadows on the bottom. Basically, what they're doing is creating an electrical current through their body, and they're making a state of matter between liquid and solid. It's called structured water, and they're actually standing on top of these discs of structured water. And humans, because we have an electrical current, we can create structured water. If you hold your hand, if this is the surface of the water, and you hold your hand like a millimeter above it, and then just let it really gently just rest on the top, you'll feel the tension, you'll feel the structured water being created by the energy. But most people never touch water like that. They just go right in, right? So there's a million ways to touch water, but some of them are ways that people have done a million times before, and some of them people have never, ever done before. Now, just to be clear, I don't tell people about structured water, right? Just going to say, yeah, find a place to sit by the side of the water, and to start, just really gently, slowly lower your hand and just let it rest on the surface. And then slowly, maybe like the water is made out of jello, just slowly push your hand in. And then once you've got your hand in, then I might offer some other examples of ways you can touch the water. Maybe you want to hold it in the cup of your hand and just listen and watch as it returns back to source. Maybe you want to throw the water into the air and see all the ripples. Maybe you want to put some on your body. So the touching the water is really just the entry point to a wider exploration of how we can engage with water. All right, let's see. Skipping rocks, yes. This one is awesome. And it doesn't even need to be rocks. You can kind of widen that out also, that it's just releasing things into the water. If you ever have a bridge, this works wonderful as a group invitation. Like y'all, spend 5 minutes gathering some beings, and then we're all going to stand on the bridge and one at a time, just release these beings into the water, and we're going to watch the ripples. And, it's kind of this like one thing starts emanating from here, and then the ripples start crossing over each other and interacting. Really hypnotic, really cool. Bare feet in the water. Yeah, so simple. Just take off your shoes, find a place to sit. Just put your feet in the water. Listening to the water. This is another great one if you have a bridge and if you have water going under the bridge. Lay down, close your eyes, just listen to the water. Notice the rain falling on the water. Yeah, if you got rain, all of a sudden, like a new partner showed up and you have all these new possibilities. Hands barely touching the water, yes. Finger in the water and notice what the water does, yes. You can take, sometimes I call this painting on water, just a stick, right? And just drawing on the surface of the water. Swaying with the water, nice, yes. Watching, reflecting, light, glittering, yes. So much we can do with water.
Blocking the water? Blocking
What was it?
water?
Walking on water? Can you do that?
No, block with a B. B for Bravo. Yeah, walk, well, whatever.
What do you mean blocking it? Like getting in the way?
Yeah, getting in the way or putting stones in the way.
Sure.
Making a dam without saying making a dam. I guess you shouldn't say make a dam, but
yeah, I mean, making a dam kind of has an object, right? There's an objective there. So now people are trying to do something, and it's not really an infinite process because once you build the dam, you're all done. But also, I used to build a lot of dams as kids. That takes hours. That is a long process.
holding the water, like seeing what it's
holding water
back or something. I don't know.
I like doing one sometimes where I'll just have people carry the water from the creek and give it to a plant. And this is a little bit like a funny, frustrating thing because by the time you get to the plant, you've only got a few drops left probably, but that's kind of part of the beauty of the invitation. Sometimes I've used cups for that. I'll just bring like a few little cups, or like even teacups will work for this if you wash them out afterwards. But yeah, carrying water, it's beautiful. It's great. Looking at the layers of the water surface underneath what's in motion on the surface and under the surface. Yes, you can just take what's in motion and give it to the water. All right. One more real quick. Let's talk about stones. What are some things we could do with stones?
Get them wet. I was just going to say you could use water to get things wet that aren't wet from the water. Yes. So getting stones wet if they're dry.
Yes. And yeah, just before we get into stones, I just want to say with the water thing, if you get the whole group to start making sounds with the water, this is a really strong moment for being permissionary or modeling, where a lot of people will start with very quiet sounds. And so as the guide, you can really open this container up by taking like the biggest rock you can carry and just dumping it, or using your hand, just making like an enormous splash. And if people start to get each other wet, all of a sudden this can turn into basically like we're a bunch of 5-year-olds again. And this is like the most fun we've ever had. So this is again one of those moments within the container where your action can really give permission for people to explore it in a more wild way versus a more tamed way. Okay, let's look at rocks. Place stones on different part of your body. Yes. Feel the heat or coolness of different stones. Yes. One thing that's cool about thermodynamics is that nothing can gain cold. It can only lose heat. So if you're holding something for a while, it equalizes with your body's temperature, right? So if you hold a cold rock, it takes heat out of your body. And if you hold a hot rock, your body takes the heat out of the rock. So just having people hold rocks for 5 minutes, it's kind of trippy because at the end of it, the same temperature. Rubbing them on your body, ooh, yeah, that sounds awesome. I do an invitation I jokingly called Korean Spa, where there was a little creek and then a big flat rock that had a tree over, and it shaded half the rock. And so half the rock was cold and half the rock was really hot. And then the water was really cold. So I just have people cycle between these 3 places, lay down on the hot rock, and then lay down on the cold rock, and then take a plunge in the water, and then lay down on the hot rock, cold rock, water. Just the difference in temperature, just getting people to move through that sequence. Awesome. Balancing rocks on each other. Yeah, totally. This one can be a little bit object oriented, or like people are like, I did it. I balanced the rocks, I'm done. So if you want to do that, maybe it's just like, yeah, balance them until they fall down and then start over again. And then you've created an infinite process, right? Noticing the different colors of the rock. Feel the texture of the stone using different parts of your body. Click the stones together or rub stones together, right? And this could be a cool one that you could do first as a solo experience, go find 2 rocks that you like the way they sound together. And then you come back, everyone stands in the circle and you say, okay, now we're going to make a rock symphony. And so one person starts, and then maybe one at a time, each person just adds their rock sound into the symphony. And then one person drops out at a time. So you kind of have a solo experience of sound with rock, and then you bring it together. You have a group experience with the sound of rock. All right, y'all are rock stars at this. Haha. So I wanted to show you a little image I made here. Hold on. Oh. I got a new computer today, and now I need to edit my my preferences. Hold on. Oh, it's telling me that I will have to quit Zoom in order to update my preferences. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to tell you about this. So one of the tricks that I use when I create my invitations is I think of it as having a bookend structure. So we do our round of sharing, what do you notice now? And at the end, the last person shares, and I'll say, thank you all for sharing. Our next invitation is called, and then I name the invitation. Then I give the invitation. And I say, any questions? No? Okay, let's. And then I name the invitation again. I think personally that naming the invitation is a very strong technical thing to do. And you want to name your invitation in such a way that if people forget everything that you just said, but they remember the name of the invitation, that they will have enough to hold on to. So all right, our next invitation is called texture gathering. wander out and explore the beings here with your sense of touch and gather whatever beings, feel evocative to your sense of touch. Bring them back here. I'll call you back in 15 minutes. Are there any questions? No? Okay. Let's go gather some textures. Gather some textures essentially says everything, right? So if you can name your invitation, usually for me, the name is like 2 or 3 words. It says exactly what we're doing. And that can kind of, I think someone asked a question about this last week. They said, what about if people forget what you said when you give the invitation? This is my answer to that question, is if you name your in such a way that it's the last thing you say to people. You'll notice I do this with What's in Motion too. I'll say our next invitation is called What's in Motion. Da 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 da. Are there any questions? Okay, let's slowly wander and notice what's in motion. So even if people forget all the stuff in the middle, they still have that. They still can hold on to that last piece. Okay. I'm going to send y'all into breakout rooms for 10 minutes. One partner. I want to see if y'all can come up with one invitation. You can pick any being you like. It could be a specific being, be a class of beings. It could be the whole more than human world. It should be sensory, should be open, should be infinite, should be simple, right? Anything can be a being. Animals, the wind, the sun, the stars, soil, water, rocks, pine trees, oak trees, any kind of tree you like. Oh, hold on, I have to do this differently. Okay, hold on. All right, please hold while I assign you to breakout rooms. All right, are there any questions before we get started? All right, we're gonna go into breakout rooms. See if you can make one invitation. Let's see what you got. No need to be perfect. All right. So, what y'all got? You can either put it in the chat or you can unmute yourself and share. This is not about being perfect, just about play.
I'll go ahead and share.
Awesome.
It's a fun one. So I was with Rachel, and this is what we came up with: to wander out and greet the miniature world. Notice the tiny things, maybe laying on your stomach and watching below the grass or the leaves, and notice if anything is moving over the tiny world and feel any of the tiny textures.
Beautiful. Wonderful. Maybe you don't need the textures part. There's so much going on just with the visual of that tiny world, right? That's one of those simplicity things where it's like, really let me get deep into the experience you're giving me. And then the textures at the end feels like, I'm going to be like really in it and then be like, oh, right. And she said I should notice the textures too. Like, okay. But when you get into that tiny world, you're not gonna need anything else, right? You're just gonna be really in that. Pat, should invitations focus on one sense and one being? Sometimes. Yeah, I mean, there are moments where I'll utilize two senses. I think two for me is usually the cap. It's like after two, it starts to feel a little overwhelming.
I think I might
And
have gone when I was doing this. I think I went like too specific too early. And so
okay.
then I like struggled to come up with like trying to like add a sentence or something. So that's what prompted my question was I was like, okay, I was like, well, my invitation was called like, get your hands dirty. And
Great.
then I had like one sentence and then I was like, well, now I don't know where to go from here. So I think I should have like started a little further back.
Yeah, I mean, get your hands dirty is probably one of those ones where maybe it'll benefit from giving people a range of possibilities for how to do that, right? Because if you say it just like that, then maybe people kind of feel like they're done within the first minute, right? They're like, well, my hands are dirty now, so I'm done, right? So yeah, helping people kind of unpack the range of possibilities here. Okay, let's see. Reach out and explore the surface below you. So this is something that already is kind of like a pop mini invitation, right? Now, this is like where we are at in this conversation is a really critical piece of this whole equation about if it's too simple, then people will feel like they have done it within the first 30 seconds, right? So the way that I like to kind of work around this is to create a replicable process. So taking Pat's example of reach out and explore the surface below you, it's like wander out and find a place to sit, close your eyes, and use your hands to explore the surface below you. And then get up and go wander out and find another place to sit down. And then close your eyes and reach out and explore the surface below you. Just keep doing this as many times as you want, and I'll call you back in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever. Because yeah, if it's just the one thing and it's something that people can feel essentially satisfied with within 30 to 60 seconds, then it's like, what now? What do I do now? Kathy, smell the earth. Right. So again, this might be one where people are going to feel like, okay, I did it. Like, I got it. I got the smell. So this is another example where creating some sort of a replicable process about discovering these new smells. It's like, I wonder if different places upon the earth smell different. And then you could, this is where like you can get edgier and edgier. Maybe just crawl around different places, smell these different parts of the earth. Then it creates us like an endless realm of possibilities. Whereas if it's like just find a place and smell the earth, it's like, okay, I'm done. Like I got it. I smelled it. All right, let's go to Catherine, and then we'll come back to the chat.
Thanks, Ben. I was working with Nina and we were focusing on listening. And I think a good name for our invitation would be closer and further away.
Mm.
And we were going to suggest that people find a place where they're comfortable, either standing or sitting, close their eyes, and then maybe cup their ears with their hands and just listen and see what's really close. And then they could practice like expanding that out, moving their hands and expanding their range so they could hear things that were further away. and then maybe noticing the silence in between. We didn't actually come up with precise wording, but that was our invitation.
Yeah, that's lovely. I mean, it's basically just, yeah, a really simple listening invitation. Just go find a place and really listen as the sounds are emerging. Notice which direction the sounds are coming from and where the sounds are going. Now, one thing to think about is the level of kind of interactivity within an invitation. This is not to say that what you just described isn't perfect. Totally fine. And if you're finding that people are kind of like essentially hitting that wall of like, I think I'm done, you can create some sort of a structure where the sound is initiating action. So you can say, find a place to stand and close your eyes and listen for the quietest sound you can hear, and then move in the direction of that sound.
Right.
See if you can discover where it's coming from. And so now to create the infinite quality here, once you've discovered that, close your eyes again and listen for the loudest sound. And then move towards that. Discover where it's coming from. And then repeat this process over and over and over again. Or there's kind of this interactivity part with sound where I'll do this with birds sometimes. I'll say, we're going to wander down this trail and we're going to give each other a little bit of distance. And whenever you hear a bird call back to it. And this can be really silly. This can be really fun. But, it's one of those things where if the sound is initiating a response, like a physical response, it creates this interactivity between participant and more than human world. So it's not just a passive, receptive sensory experience. It's not just like I'm absorbing the sensory information. The sensory information is actually galvanizing an action or a response that then kind of drives the invitation forward, right? But yeah, that's beautiful, wonderful. Juju, Laura and I created an invitation about the signs of spring, the visual experience of discovering how beings are emerging from the earth. Yeah, awesome. Sometimes you're working in partnership with the season. It's great. Lynn, water movement. Please wander and move the water around us. You can move the water with a part of your body or another part of nature or through observation. Notice and move to another place as you wish and try again. Yeah, beautiful, wonderful. Angel, Brooks and I worked on a light and shadow invitation. We didn't quite name it yet. We didn't complete the invitation, but here is an iteration. Wander out and explore light and shadow. How do they touch the beings of this place? Yeah, it's great. And you can make this interactive in such a way that it can involve the person's shadow. And then you could do this in pairs or small groups. I really like this one with kids where if it's like a bright sunny day and kind of the aperture of the light is kind of steep, I'll have them pair up and then I'll be like, all right, one person's going to stand facing the sun, so the shadow is behind them. And then the other person using like sticks or rocks or whatever you have is going to trace the outline of their shadow. And then the other kid is going to stand next to that kid's shadow sculpture. So it's like they're holding hands or something. And then the other person traces their shadow. And it's just like, yeah, you can work with the dynamics of your sensory enmeshment in the world, right? So it's not just the world out there, it's also how we are a part of the world, how we are kind of enmeshed in this experience. But yeah, light and shadow is rich. There's this one invitation, the one invitation that I took from my trip to Japan, they called it komorebi catching. So they gave everyone a plain white sheet of paper like this. Komorebi is the pattern of the light moving through the branches and the leaves. And so they'd say, okay, just hold the white piece of paper out in front of you, and the bright white really accentuates the light and the shadow. And she'd say, okay, now just very slowly walk down the trail and just watch the paper. And it's like this crazy, like psychedelic, light show. It's really cool. So that's an example of sometimes you're going to want little props. And I always say, don't let the prop like dominate the invitation, right? It shouldn't get in the way too much. Simple things like cups or paper. There was a really cool invitation I took from a guy that I met in Finland, a Japanese guy, but I met him in Finland. He basically had this deck of origami paper in every color. And first he just said, okay, I want you all to take one of these pieces of paper. And he'd say, okay, now go find that color in the forest. And it was wild because some people had like gold and silver and, you know, they were like, I'm never going to find this color. But then given 20 minutes to really, really use your eyes and to see the tiny, tiny details, everyone found their color. So yeah, there's lots of possibility with that. Okay, couple minutes left. Let's see if I can get through this. Jane and I made tree leaning. Wander out and find a tree that you are drawn to. Let some of your body's weight be supported by the tree. You may lean any part of your body against the tree. You may want to just rest your hand on the tree while you're in contact. Feel free yourself, and while you are in contact, feel yourself and feel the tree. You can repeat this as many times as you want to. Let's go and lean on some trees. Yeah, beautiful. Juju, last one.
I had a question actually based on what
Great.
you just said about the colors thing. Is that open, or is that, or rather is that infinite in your point of view, or is it kind of like you found it and then how would you facilitate that being like more of a continuous process?
Good question. So this person is not an ANFT guy. He's working in a whole different range of things. But if I were to just make that in, I would just say, you know, when you find the color, see if you can find another and another and another. Or this is where you get creative, right? Like a big part of what we're teaching you relies on learning the rules and then breaking them like an artist. So this is where creativity is really important. So if I do the origami thing and I send people out and I say, find the color and then come back when you've found it. And then I start pairing people up as they show up. So like, you know, Jill and Juju show up first and I'm like, great, you two, I'm going to send you back out, show each other the origami and the color where you found it, and then have them go out and do that for a while. And when you send people out in that kind of a way, they're going to linger in that experience because now you have a social dynamic and you're not feeling like, oh, I'm done. You're going to show each other the things and then you're just going to start talking about stuff. And maybe it's related to the nation, or maybe it's going to be like, Juju, I love those earrings. Where'd you get them? And it's like, great. Okay, you're on your own journey now. It's all good. And then 20 minutes are up and I'll coyote call people. And whether I got everyone to partner up and go out is superfluous because you're all still in the container. You're all still in the experience. So this is where you're getting a little bit creative, playful. All right, we are at 5:30. So I love ending on time. I'm going to try to wrap this up for you all. The last thing I wanted to say is just that gathering these invitations is so hard when you're sitting at a desk and trying to think about them in the abstract. It's so much easier if you just take your body and you go outside and you just pick a being and you ask the question that I asked you about water, trees, and stones. How many ways can my body interact with this being? And just play. Just try a whole bunch of different stuff and see what lands for you. And then take that and come back to the desk and start crafting, start building these invitations. All right. So in this 5th module, you're going to start writing invitations. You've got 4. Please go outside. Go outside and play. That's your homework. Go outside and play. Gather those experiences, turn them into invitations. So until next time, wonderful call. Super fun being with you all. And next week, I'm going to be out. I'm going to be running an immersion in Minnesota. Hopefully it's not going to be snowing. And or I'll be working in partnership with the snow. It's all good. But Tam will be here, and you'll be talking a little bit about bioregional learning, which is super awesome, super exciting module. And just another reminder that at the end of bioregional learning, that's kind of the inflection point of this training course, where assuming you have done all of your assignments in modules 2 through 6, then you will start guiding walks, which is really exciting. And Tam and I are super excited to debrief them with you and hear all about it. All right, Kat, is this a question that you think maybe is pertinent to the whole group?
Yes, on the schedule, it says Tam's doing a walk on April 7th, this Sunday, but in the schedule, it's listed after next week's session on April 9th. So is her walk this Sunday or next Sunday?
I'll double check with Tam. I'll pop you out an email, but let's assume that the schedule is correct. And I will double check, and I'll send an email out with the link and all that.
Thank you.
All right. Have a fabulous rest of your day, and I'll see y'all soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.